Morning, everybody. Welcome to the session of Autumn Colors. This is a Yunnan red tea. We're going to have fun with this today. This is the end of the red tea sessions. That is the end of this set of sessions. So we started with erudition. That's a Chimeng County. We went to insouciant. This is a Dian from Fengcheng. And now we're with Autumn Colors. So take out your notes. We're going to review some things. And let's start out, as we normally do, with an odd little discussion about tea and meditation. And then we're going to do a little history, and then we're going to get that right down to it with Autumn Colors. So tea can be used, and often is used, to aid in meditation. Traditionally, what it was used for in those terms was to keep people awake so that they could meditate and reach higher levels. And certainly, when you're doing tea the way we do it here, or the way they would do it in China with gongfu tea, small cup tea that is, there is the sense of being present. So this is a confluence of where meditation and tea meet. It isn't the same, though. And so let's focus on that, because you get some discussions of all sorts of things related to meditation. And then there's a backup effect. Oh, well, if I'm going to meditate, then let me do something to the tea process as well, as if doing those two things are in alignment. Are they in alignment? Not exactly. So let's take, for example, if you change the rules of doing gongfu cha, is that in alignment with tea meditation? The answer is it is not. By definition, gongfu cha, when it's correctly, executed, is in perfect alignment because it's about being present. Why do we drink tea? Ordinarily, and there's lots of reasons to drink tea, but primarily, as a starting point in China, it's about the beverage. It's about the flavor. It's about getting the maximum that you can get from the tea leaf, the maximum understanding, the maximum enjoyment from the tea leaf. Over the years, you've seen some interesting formulations, again, which aren't exactly in alignment. I just told you the overlapping, I should say, place of alignment, which again is being present, because both in meditation and in good tea practice, you're present. Does that mean you should change the rules for making tea? And the answer is no. It does not mean that, because that's not in alignment. So this is just one thing where there's confusion, and we see lots of confusion about this. Do we care? We don't care. I mean, you can do anything you want and stand on your head, balance cups on the soles of your feet, and call that tea meditation. You do have to be present under those circumstances. Otherwise, the cups, and has hot liquid, will fall down and you'll be scalded. And it doesn't matter whether there's one or two leaves in the cups, or if there is the full complement of leaves in the cups. You have to be present. So that's the point here. Enough said. Let's move on to history. I love history. Where am I going to start today? Let's start BC. Back in those times, when tea was first being used and enjoyed, How was it used again? Let's bring ourselves to a reminder of that. It was used really medicinally. Then it morphed into a beverage, and actually in between full beverage status and medicinal status was the catalyst or age. So the catalyst age was where tea was used to enhance traditional Chinese medicines. So this all happened BC. So we get a starting point. Where am I going to move to next? Today we're talking about autumn colors, and we're going to talk about improvements in the tea processing technique in Yunnan since 1938. And we're going to put this in perspective, right? Because 1938 to now isn't thousands of years. Oh no, that's only 80 years. So it's a short period of time. And why should we not be surprised that there's so much innovation? Because in the early stages of every form of tea, there was lots of innovation. So you went from lots of innovation to, we're starting to establish a standard, to, yes, we now have the standard. And that all basically occurred within the first 200 years of every single period of change and innovation. Yes.
Participant shares, in this context, BC could mean before coffee.
You know, I love the fact that you all are alert this morning, because that's exactly what I meant, before coffee. Excellent, outstanding. So we get to it being a beverage. And so it's a beverage as loose leaf up until about the 400s or 500s. And then all of a sudden, it starts being more than just a beverage in loose leaf. It starts having a different format of presentation. It starts being presented as a compressed cake. That's very different. And that meant that the processing modality had to be different. To get from loose leaf to pressed cake, very hard in the beginning. And it required different tools, and it required the farmers to do something a little bit different. So as such, in the 600s, you had pressed cakes. It was pressed green tea cakes, and that went and developed to a high degree by about the 800s. And then they're doing all sorts of fancy additions, little flowers sometimes some spices in that. I mean, they had the Tivana thing going over 1,000 years ago. And that came to a height at about the year 2000. I'm sorry, 1000. After 1000, you started to go to a different methodology. What was the leading change? The leading change was you went from steaming to roasting. And as soon as you went to roasting, that was giving you a different taste profile in the tea cakes. Because if you steam, you're going to get more of that grassiness, more of the freshness. You roast, you're going to get a little bit different flavor. And so that developed all the way to 1368, fully in swing at 1368. New emperor comes to the throne. Oh, and what throne is this? This is a new dynasty. This is the Ming dynasty. And he says, hear me and obey. And he makes a profound change to the rules of processing tea. He says, look, folks, no more tea cakes. Why did he do that? Because he came from poor background. He saw how hard it was on the peasants. And he basically, when he ascended the throne, said, hey, we're going to make your life easier. And in one fell swoop, eliminated. By 1391, he went out and sent soldiers to destroy all the existing known tea cake machinery. And so you had a new era in tea processing. So again, my point being, that era lasted for about 200 years while people fiddled around, maybe not the right verb, while people explored in a scientific manner. That's not quite right either. While they just simply explored new methodologies for processing tea. And out of that grew, by the late 1500s, this start of the Wulong process, the cliff tea process, because it started there in northern Fujian province. Developed. By about 1644, ooh, this is good. And starting to become consistent. And then out of that process, you got the red tea process, followed by yellow, white. So again, why am I going through all of this? Because I'm showing you that in the early stages, when you make a change in processing methodology, it takes time to fully develop. And a lot of experimentation occurs during those early times. So where did I say we were in terms of red tea for Yunnan Province, specifically for Fengqing? We're within that 80 first 80 years. So what new thing has dramatically happened in this 80 years? Well, obviously in 1938, when you made the first red tea, because prior to 1938, what were they doing in Yunnan Province? Basically, still green tea. But when the guys came down from Anhui, and by the way, how long did it take them to get there? Once they were in Kunming, it took 3 days by bus to get to Shaguan, 10 days by walking, because there was no other way to get to Fengqing. And that's where they discovered these ancient tea tree gardens. Been harvested for years, green tea. And these guys from Anhui, remember, they were doing red tea. And so they said, gosh, one bud, one leaf, one bud, two leaves, please. And we're going to do red tea here. We're going to see how it goes. Oh, it went great, because that first crop, they smuggled out, because remember, that was World War II by that time. They smuggled out of Yunnan via Hong Kong to Britain, and this red tea sold for the highest price of red tea ever from China. It was that unique. Oh, good. Ancient tree. Good. Good stuff. Fengqing. Really good. All right. So that gets you, we're changing methodology, right? And so they developed a methodology. And by the way, where's the pressure to change methodology? Let's see, let me think about this. In the whole world, what form of tea is mostly drunk? It turns out it's red tea. Oh, and what percent of all tea made is red tea? It's 70+% of the entire world crop is red tea. You're not drinking tea unless you're drinking red tea in some parts of the world. Now, obviously not in China. You know, in China and Japan, they know you're not drinking tea unless you're drinking green tea. But in the rest of the world, you're not drinking tea unless you're drinking red tea. So what in the last 20 years has been the big innovations coming directly out of Fengqing? And remember, our tea comes from Fengqing this morning, autumn colors. They changed the methodology. This is subtle. So remember, I went roughly through what the methodology was last week. I shortcutted it. You pick the tea leaves, you wither, you bruise, and then you oxidize, and then you bake. Simple as that. Boy, did I shortcut. What new innovations in these last 20 years has revolutionized the flavor of red tea coming out of Fengqing? Very few people talk about this because they just simply don't know. So let's go to withering for a minute. I just glossed over that before, right? Let's go a little deeper into that. So pre-2000, usually withered indoors, you had a compressor that blew air up, withered the leaves. You're trying to remove about 50% of the moisture, 40 to 50, actually 40 to 60% of the moisture. And so then you get an end product. Well, some smart farmer said, you know what? I've been up to the Anhui Mountains. I've watched how they make their cliff teas, and their cliff teas are really good. Might we benefit if instead of withering indoors, we withered outdoors, sunlight withering? We're gonna have to experiment with how long to do that. Let's try that. First innovation. And right away, they had a taste difference. What happened? The phenol ammonia compounds. I love using scientific terminology. You know, that means I know stuff. The phenol ammonia compounds were reduced. What's the end result of reducing phenol ammonia compounds? Less bitterness. Oh, that's a good result. So that was the first thing. And this same set of farmers, there were 2 or 3 of them who were experimenting, they said, you know what? That second step or the third step of shaking, let's bruise the leaves a couple times. So, you know, they used normal toss up the leaves bruising. And by the way, this changed as they mechanized it. They used in the mechanization, but they still actually mechanized, even in the mechanization, used a longer and interrupted, in quotes, shaking. And of course, the mechanized way of doing it isn't shaking. It's actually kind of grinding and compressing at the same time. But at any rate, the innovation was, okay, we're going to wither, we'll shake. You know what? We're going to shake again. But we're going to shake with a different purpose. So the first purpose was, let's bruise those things, the leaves. Second time was, let's shake them and kind of just get air in there. You're still bruising a little bit, but you're also in some way, by having all that air in there, drying them a little bit. And then, oh, by the way, let's wither again. We loved the sunlight withering so much the first time. Let's do it again. If we got better or less phenol ammonia compounds, maybe we can even get less than what we had before. And sure enough, there was a flavor change. So I ask you this, because we're doing science today and history. Do you think that the caffeine content declined? Turns out, no, it did not. It stayed roughly the same, even though you added a processor. Okay. So what was the concrete change that they saw in terms of aroma and flavor? Well, particularly for aromas, by withering it twice like this, sunlight withering, all of a sudden, floralness occurred. So the compounds that were being affected via sunlight were the compounds that create aroma. And they changed such that we're getting floral now. Good. So you see, people assume, not any of you though, of course, because you know, people assume that we can just mechanically go through, if I give you 8 steps, yeah, I could do that at home. I could grow tea and I could do that at home. Turns out, no, because there's so much involved in this and it keeps evolving. And unless you have a base of information, unless you see the historical base, how do you know how to produce great tea? Turns out you don't. And this is why so many places that come to tea growing and production late and aren't in China, they have no chance of producing the highest quality tea. Zero. They don't have the experience. And it turns out, I don't know about in the rest of things in the world, it turns out in the tea producing methodology, experience counts. History counts. So what else did they do differently? During this last 20, 25 years, when they oxidized, so they piled the tea, they also covered it with damp cloth. This changed the nature of the tea. And so when you're talking about change the nature of the tea, this sounds to me like you're changing the basic elements, chemistry of the tea. And all of you are so smart. This is true. So what normally happens during the oxidation process? You get those green tea catechins, you expose them to enzymes. Oh, am I running out of time? Oh, I am running out of time. That's okay. About 4 more minutes. You expose the green tea catechins to the air, they get oxidized, and they become the following things. First, they become theaflavins. Theaflavins adds brightness to your red teas. Enough theaflavins interacting together create some thearubicans. Ooh, what do those things do? Well, they create redness to the tea. And then you have theabronins. What do? They have add darkness to the tea. So you have all these chemical compounds that are being created. And by covering, as you were oxidizing, this created a deeper richness to the teas. So what did you do after you oxidize? You baked. Are there rules for baking? Can you just throw them in the oven? Find your Betty Crocker book. Oh, tea leaves in the oven 1 hour. Set it for an hour, 325. Can you do that? No. This again is experiential. So typically, they turn that oven on and they call it a rough fire in the beginning. It's about 200 to 250 degrees. How long? 15 minutes or so. Every farmer's a little bit different. After they've done the rough fire, they pour it out and, spread it out and then collect it again and then bake it in an oven. And they usually bake for about an hour. Usually around 190 to 210, somewhere in that range. Slow bake. Let's get out that moisture. Let's reduce the possibility of molding. And oh, by the way, let's enhance the flavor. Let's do all of these things. These rules, while they may have started out as single purpose rules, in other words, let's get that moisture down. We don't get that moisture down, we're gonna have a problem. They then finessed them. They refined them. They included flavor extension, flavor enhancement. So this is, in the last 20 years, what's happened to Dinhong from Fengcheng. Dinhong, D-I-A-N-H-O-N-G, is what you see sometimes in the store for red tea from Fengcheng. Sometimes it applies overall to red teas from China. And it's not one tea. It's a category referring to red tea from Yunnan, actually, because Din is in Chinese. The character means Yunnan. So simply put, it's red tea from Yunnan. By custom, it used to mean really red tea from the Fengcheng area. These days it's broad, red tea from all of Yunnan. So innovation, now you can see why it's quite natural for innovation to be going on in Yunnan. They've only been doing red tea for 80 years. And now we're in the rich innovation vein of its history. And that's why so many interesting things continue to come from Yunnan. And these are old and ancient tree resources where this is coming from. Okay, enough of an introduction. I got my scientific words out of me this morning. I got my history mostly out of me this morning. But I'm thirsty. And the tea master has already walked over here 4 or 5 minutes ago, indicating how thirsty she is, which means you must be extremely thirsty. So it is my supreme pleasure to bring forth Biju, the beautiful, luminous tea master.
Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, we do dian hong cha from the Yunnan. So, okay. We do, the 4 cup working together. So for 2 people, okay. So, 469, I take the 175.
So the temperature for this tea is 175 degrees. The packets that we've sent you are 5 grams. And this is her normal tableau. She's actually this is a demonstration and then she'll brew with you afterwards. So this is what you normally see, 4 16-ounce cups, strainers. All you really need is 2 16-ounce cups and a strainer. Heating the cups, making sure that they're absolutely clean, spick and span, all the soap residue is eliminated. The timing for this is gonna be when it's ready, 2 minutes. And you notice she has Bijou has a certain rhythm. And you all develop your own rhythm. The point is for it to be something you can recognize as being present rhythm. And whether it's a faster cadence or a slower cadence, it's a cadence. That's the point of it. Each step is performed roughly the same each time. And certainly in the same order.
Just start. Oh, okay. 175. I use it. Rather.
It's a steady rhythm. Notice not in a hurry, paying attention, not splattering water all over the place. Just, it's almost like a ballet performance. Every step follows a previous step. Steady, beautiful, in rhythm, present.
This tea is here. It's right. 5 grams, 3 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I start it.
She drains that cup and puts the tea leaves in, to shake them around. Looks like she's playing, but she's not. What she's doing is heating the leaves, waking them up. Same with the second cup. You notice she pours water back in the kettle so that she can control the pour into the cup. On the sides, trying to get underneath the tea leaves. Do the best you can with that. Don't worry if you don't do it in the same way. Remember, this is a kind of a ballet. Every step follows the other, but every performance is a little bit different, isn't it? And therefore, as your mood and as your rhythm and as your feeling for the day changes, your way of how you're going to brew it slightly changes. And it doesn't matter. It does not matter. At the end of the day, this tea is so good, it speaks for itself. And that's one of the things. So we had many new people come in this week. And it's really a joy talking to new people. We had this new person that Aaron and Acacia convinced to come to the shop this week. And this person had been everywhere in the Bay Area and all the other famous tea shops. Oh, wait a minute. Are there? Oh, let me not go there. In the Bay Area. And had not been here. And couldn't believe that there would be a shop that had anything better than what she'd already experienced. And this is somebody they met at the World Tea Association in Las Vegas. So theoretically having access to beautiful tea resources there. And when she came, she was blown away. It's a whole nother level here. And that's the thing to understand about Sophie's tea. And that's why the opening discussion about not being casual with an overlap of meditation in how you process tea. You have really outstanding tea here. Okay, timer has, both timers have gone off. Tea master is separating the tea leaves from the tea. Just in a smooth rhythm, not in a hurry. Very calm. So after doing this, yours should look something like this. So this has darker color to it, doesn't it? That's the first thing you notice right away. And as usual, we're going to enter the quality arena. And what is the quality arena? Quality arena is where we explore astringency. Where is it going on in the mouth? Aftertaste. Is there an aftertaste? What is it? Energy, the effect of the tea on you. What is the aroma like? And you do that as secondary. So the second sip you take, you're focused on the aroma. And what's the taste coming through? All right, so let's go ahead and enter the quality arena. 175-degree steeping, so this means that you can take more of a sip. You're still careful because there is some heat here. You're gonna swish it around. You'll watch me swish it around. When you do it, this is what you'll do. All right, this one is presenting some astringency. When there's an aftertaste, I'm getting a hint of an energetic. I'm going to take a second sip. Let's see what that yields. And in the second sip, I'm going to focus on aroma. I'm going to focus on taste. Remember, we're not blowing the aroma away. We're keeping it in front of us. Okay, I've made some judgments. It's your turn to brew, remembering to take your notes out from erudition and insouciant, because this is different from both of those. So you draw your 175-degree water. You set your timer for 2 minutes. You make sure that your cups, and you can use any temperature of water between 170 and 212 to make sure that your cups are spick and span. And you notice she uses a third cup to cool it down even faster. You don't have to use that. 2 cups is enough. But we have techniques in here. Really, Biju's rhythm is just beautiful to watch. Not feeling any, or not conveying any pressure of time, conveying a sense of she has an order, she knows what she wants to accomplish. Taking the leaves and putting them in the heated cup. shaking and smelling. Then adding the water. Pouring on the side of the cup. Setting the time. Now, one of the things I want to remind all of you, because we've seen an uptick in the shop. Not actually in the shop, but people who have reported from the shop increases in COVID. You see it in the newspapers. So I want to refresh your memories about an article I sent to you maybe 2 or 3 months ago about a research study. And should you contract COVID, or should you be trying to prevent it? One of the things that this study said, which was just so amazing, was that you take red tea, brew it, you can brew it a little extra length of time, but roughly the times that we do it here. And then it's as simple as swishing it around in your mouth for 10 seconds and then spitting it out. Or you can swallow, either way. And it gets rid of 99.9% of the virus if you have it in the mouth. So this was this surprising study that was done before. So again, if you have incipient COVID, it's worthwhile doing that. There's no harm in doing that. And in fact, you may receive this wonderful benefit from doing that. Okay, so as we're letting this steep, the other thing about this, remember, I said it's the theobronins that create darkness. Well, this particular red, autumn colors, has a heavier darkness. So what that means is that the theobronin content in this is higher. Timer's gone off. You're going to separate the tea from the tea leaves from the tea itself. Okay, and take your time as you enter the quality arena and start to get a sense of what this tea is. This tea is really different from both erudition and insouciant. And I like the differentness of this tea because this fits a different sort of mood for me when I'm looking for something from red tea. Take your time. And while you're thinking about this, one of the things I will tell you is that this particular set of farmers is getting this from old tea trees, not ancient. So these would be around 600 to 800 years old. So they still have heritage, but they're not, and you can taste it, by the way. So one of the things I would point out to you is when you have Black Beauty or Effortless or any of the ancient tree reds, you get this inherent smoothness. You can almost taste the ancientness in this, which is in those versus this. Yes.
G shares the warm leaves have a dried stone fruit sweet aroma.
Warm leaves, dried stone fruit aroma. So right away, based upon what we talked about today, this would tell you that this farmer probably used sun-dried because you're getting and remembering floral and fruit for us are the same. I know that they're not the same. I know those two words mean something different. But from a recognition standpoint, many times we say one or the other, meaning one or the other. They're that close. Yes.
Rob shares the steeped leaves have a malt, umami, and hint of floral scent, whereas the tea liquor has a dried fruit sweet smell.
Tea liquor has dried fruit sweet smell. And Rob also noted that the dried leaves or steep leaves, I'm sorry, have umami,
Malt and floral.
malt and floral. So this is really good because it shows you that there's almost always a distinction between the leaves themselves and the end result. And it's really good to note that because when you evaluate the tea, when any tea judge evaluates the tea, they take the totality. What is that aroma and is it appealing? What is that taste and is it appealing? Good job.
People are thinking, let me ask, these are old trees, so 800 years-ish versus ancient trees, which would be more 1,000 years and up. In this shop, you have a temperature brewing difference, 170 degrees or less for the ancient trees. Is some of that for this, and then for this one, it was 175, like you might brew a Cheeman. I wonder, does the processing technique for this tea, the difference between the way this tea is processed today versus the ancient leaves also play into the temperature requirement?
Great question. So the question notes that there's certain processing methodology and a certain age related to autumn colors. And therefore further brings up the contrast with how ancient tree, so the Ilau stuff, for example, is processed and brewed. So typically at about 170 versus 175. Yet when we go north to Anhui for the small leaf, it's more, this resembles in some way more what goes on in Anhui. What a great question, because it draws the historical connection between Anhui and Fengcheng. Fengcheng reds were developed by Anhui professionals, and therefore you get more of that style. This is not indigenous style. Indigenous Ilau is more indigenous style, and it's really much older stock. And so the result is, in some ways, and it's weird to say this, it's almost a little counterintuitive, the older stock is more delicate. This is hardier, therefore can use and benefit from a slightly higher water temperature. Great question.
Peter shares, I find this tea powerfully subtle, but it draws me easily to be more present, and it reveals.
Peter comments, powerfully subtle, but draws him in to be present. And I love that comment because this is very different than insouciant. Especially in that sense, because this does project power right away. There's a depth to this flavor. This is not, insouciant has the playfulness right away, the fruitiness right away. It's just a fun and easy red. This is more complex. This has a depth to it. And for red tea drinkers, if you're looking for a more complex experience, this is it. And your comment, Peter, highlights that, yes.
Stacy shares, I was just thinking that this reminded me of an Anhui red.
Ah, great catch, Stacy. Yes, this does. Reminds her of an Anhui red. And again, for a very, very good reason, because A, it's not ancient tree, and B, this is closer to the original way that they would have processed it in Anhui.
Rob comments, the tea liquor is light on the tongue. And there's a flavor that's almost like a feeling I get when I drink yellow tea, like standalone or veiled, but much more subtle and in the background.
Oh, interesting. So light on the tongue with a
Flavor.
subtle flavor, much like a yellow tea, like standalone or veil. And actually, this comment is really interesting, and it comes from Rob, who has a very wide range of taste experiences from the shop. So he's able to draw that type of comparison. And I would say not only to draw that type of comparison, but favorably draw that type of comparison, because there is something deeper in this tea. Again, insouciant presents in one way that is pretty straightforward. Erudition is more complex, and this, by contrast, is almost deep and subtle. Great job, Rob. Okay, I'll finish up here with a comment, and then I'll finish up in totality. The comment being that the depth of this tea was really what attracted us right away, because among the Yunnan Reds from Fengcheng, there is none other like this. You have other Yunnans from Fengcheng that have different flavor profiles, but nothing that has quite this depth. Energetics wise, for me, this provides a warmth throughout my body. I think that that may be disguised for you because you're working on the depth aspect of this, and that makes a lot of sense to me. The other aspect of this, which is really, really interesting, this is one of the darkest color of the Yunnan reds, or the Denhung reds. And again, part of this is this particular varietal set of varietal trees in this area, or in this particular tea garden, and also the processing modality for this. Okay, this has been a fun session for me, because I do like highlighting the fact of the change in methodology and how it's affecting Yunnan Reds. And you're going to continue to see changes in Yunnan Reds because they're done in a different way than Anhui, and done in a different way than the Fujian Reds. And therefore, as it develops, I expect this set of development to continue to bring some interesting results for us. The other thing I would note is, again, this big gap in the way that indigenous peoples handle reds and more traditional handling of reds, from where the origin is Anhui and its Han people. So really a very different way of handling the reds, and it's very distinctive. Yes.
Stacy shares first great tea and great class, and then Peter shares, in mentioning that the world thinks of red tea when thinking of tea, which you mentioned earlier, John. And Japan and China think of green. With all of these different teas, is that really how it is in China, generally speaking? They're thinking of red primarily when Chinese think of tea, or what
Thinking of
modality?
green.
Or they're thinking of green?
Yes,
They're thinking
so,
of green.
so this is a great question, Peter, about starting point of tea. And again, in the West, it's more red tea because that's more available. And that's used as a base of a lot of blends. And whites have come to the West relatively late. Green has been in the West and now is having some sort of resurgence because so many doctors say, particularly for heart health, that green is very good. So there's some interest in that. But in China, remembering how many years of green tea have they had? So 2,000 to 3,000 years of green tea. How many years of red tea have they had? No more than 350 or 400 years of red tea. So, and it was very regionalized. I can tell you that from a popularity standpoint and what I would think about if I were Chinese in China, what they would think about is green and oolongs almost in the same breaths. And that's because both of those hold great interest to the Chinese palate. Red holds great economic benefit, but it doesn't hold a lot of interest to the Chinese palate. So let's step back for a minute. Everywhere we go in China, when we're in a more informal situation, we either get, generally speaking, one of three teas. We either get an oolong, we get served one of three teas, an oolong, a green. If we're in Yunnan, we typically don't get served red unless we're at a farm that's producing that. We get served a raw black. If it's just more of a social occasion, sometimes a fully fermented. Red is not served very often. When we're in Chiman, when we're in Anhui, do we get red tea? Only when we're in Chiman County and only when we're at the places where they're directly producing it. And at the highest level, so remembering that years before, I used to work with officials from many different parts of China. And typically, it was going to be a oolong or a green that was the tea that was gifted. It was not a red. And white tea is so new onto the playing field that it's just not much thought about outside of the white tea areas of China. Now, of course, from a health perspective, yes, whites are more and more prominent in China. Japan, the situation is 98% of what they produce is some form of green tea. It's either matcha or it's steamed green tea. They produce just an infinitesimally small amount of red tea in Japan. And one of the reasons we're looking to go ahead and start selling red tea and fermented tea and white tea into the Chinese market is simply they're not exposed to it. They don't have much of it. They don't really have an understanding of what it is. So this is a really good question. Whereas here, what happened? The British colonized India, and as a way to get control of currency, because they at first were losing a ton of currency buying Chinese teas, and not having anything that the Chinese really wanted. Well, once they figured out how to do red tea, then they were able to make some other moves and kind of balance that out. Not in a good way, by the way. I'm not suggesting that selling opium to China was a good thing, but that's what they did. And so let me ask you this question. In the very beginning in Britain, were they drinking red tea? And the answer would be no, because pre-1600s, and in fact, even in the early 1600s, what were they drinking? What was being exported was green tea. And it was only later, late in the 1600s, early 1700s, that red tea was exported more, became very popular on the continent. It became hooked to tea culture that would be European tea culture, so little sandwiches, scones, to royalty, to setting actually the time clock of when you eat, because royalty at 4 o'clock in the afternoon rolls out afternoon tea with the snacks, and then dinner at 7 or 8, something like that. So culturally, it played an enormous role. And of course, when America became colonized, what happened? They brought forth stuff from the continent. And hence, we really didn't have much exposure except to what was being used in Britain and on the European continent. Yes.
Peter asks, where does yellow tea fall into that schema in China?
Yellow tea was isolated. It has always been isolated. It was never very popular except in the very small areas it was produced. And it's only in recent years, and there's 2 reasons in recent years that it's become more popular. Actually, 3 reasons. One is the National Academy of Sciences in China in the 1980s, early 1980s, realized, almost no more yellow teas being produced. We better make films, we better make documentaries about this so we can save this as a historical attribute. So that's one reason. Second reason, Japanese started to do research on yellow tea and produced the following finding, which said, oh my gosh, for liver health, this is incredible. So that created a small uptick. Third reason, in China, as it became wealthier, all of a sudden you developed this class of aficionados, tea aficionados in China, that were looking for the next new thing. So they would swing to arena or the category by category. And when they swung to yellow tea, that produced an uptick in interest, in market viability. You had the Academy of Sciences encouraging younger farmers in these particular areas to take this up. So there was a greater market from that standpoint. But at the end of the day, yellow tea is still the least understood of all the teas, and it's also the least produced of all the teas. And yet, for those of you who've been in here, you know that yellow tea is interesting, from light and floral, light and sweet, roasted and sweet, to popcorn, to a full umami experience. You get this full interesting range out of yellow teas. Great. As usual, I have to salute all of you because you're perceptive in identification of what's going on with the teas. In addition, you link what we've talked about before with what we're talking about now. And then you have broader questions, which are really interesting, both from a historical perspective as well as from a scientific perspective. I can't think of a group more educated and better trained tea tasters than you. And it's always fun to spend Saturday morning with you. Your responsibilities for this week, even in the midst of this uptick of COVID, you all stay healthy. We'll see you next week. We're gonna start a new series, and I believe the new series, oh my goodness, I've forgotten what it is. I think it is green tea, and I think it's gonna be green light, I believe, which leads us off. If you'll hold on 1 second, I will pull it up. Okay, here we go. Oops, I guess I have to spell things properly. Up there. Oh, white tea, okay. Jewel? Jewel, okay, thank you. Huh?
Jewel and Comfort and Gossamer Silver.
Oh
Needle.
my goodness, we
White
have a
tea series.
great white tea lineup. Jewel, Comfort, and Gossamer Silver Needle. So next week, we'll see you same time, same place with Jewel. You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.